Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere aki nei, the Whakarewarewa geothermal village remains closed after a tourist suffers serious burns from falling into a sinkhole that appeared out of nowhere. We talked to volcanologist Brad Scott. Priority one for the country's new health entity, more medical staff. So where are the targets and what is the plan? The beachside town that is still in the dark 3 days after flooding took out the power. Ka kite, the doctor is no longer in the house. Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, clocks off. And hot cross buns all year round. Does the mere mention make you hot and cross or super happy and slightly peckish? Controversial, we know. Do watch us on Sky Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. Bystanders and staff heard cries for help when a visitor fell into a geothermal sinkhole in Rotorua yesterday. The woman and her husband from Australia were at the popular Whakarewarewa village. General Manager Mike Gibbons says the woman ended up in a deep steam-filled hole and staff heard yells.
Through their yells and screams for assistance that two of our guides nearby had heard the situation and rushed to the scene to help pull the wife out of a 1 metre deep hole that had opened up.
Mike Gibbons says the attraction is closed while WorkSafe and Rotorua Lakes Council investigate. He says the woman is stable and will probably be transferred to Waikato Hospital's burns unit. Health NZ Te Whatu Ora says dealing with workforce shortages is its top priority. The board has been in a closed-door meeting today discussing some of the biggest issues faced in the health system. Hospital are delaying surgeries amid a struggle to deal with winter demand, COVID-19 and staff shortages. The chair, Rob Campbell, says they don't yet have a target for how many nurses and doctors needed to be brought into the system.
It will honestly be wasting time arguing the toss about how many hundreds it is or how many thousands it is in various roles. The numbers are big, they're very pressing, and we've just got to get on and knock it. When we get closer to what might be a target, we can talk about targets. A target, frankly, right now wouldn't help us.
Rob Campbell says initiatives are set to be announced next week. Hawke's Bay health officials hope a new private hospital will help alleviate the stress felt by the public system. Kaweka Hospital held its official opening day today in Hastings. It's right across the road from the region's public hospital, which has about 2,700 people waiting for elective surgeries. More than 1,300 have been waiting more than 4 months. Kaweka Hospital is expected to do up to 1,500 surgeries for the public sector a year. Surgeries are due to start in a month. The media company NZME Radio has apologised to the Prime Minister's partner Clark Gayford and paid him an undisclosed sum after it aired comments about him being the subject of criminal charges it now accepts as untrue. In a statement, he says the comments aired on the Kick Fresh Music Friday podcast back in March and published on social media were based on rumours which are baseless lies. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
NZME Radio has apologised for the comments and the hurt and distress they have caused. It accepts Mr Gayford has never been the subject of criminal charges and is not now the subject of criminal charges in any court in New Zealand. The statement says as part of the settlement, NZME Radio agreed to pay him a confidential sum. NZME Radio says it has nothing further to add. The online version of the podcast has been removed.
The registered owner of a website muddling links to Auckland mayoral candidates appears to be a young Nat. Anyone visiting efesocollins.co.nz or craiglord.co.nz found themselves redirected to the website of rival candidate Leo Molloy. The Domain Name Commission previously listed the contact for Mr Collins' site as a Leo Molloy. It now lists a Tristram Speedy of Auckland as the contact, a person who, according to LinkedIn, is Secretary and Deputy Chair of the Northern Young Nats. Mr Molloy says he isn't bothered in the slightest.
We don't stop for barking dogs. We don't listen to that sort of stuff. So didn't register on our radar.
Tristram Speedy told RNZ he could neither confirm nor deny any involvement. The road where a bus and car crashed this afternoon in North Canterbury will remain closed for the next few hours. Whakarewarewa says the police serious crash unit is investigating the collision on State Highway 1 near Clarence at about 1 o'clock. The agency will provide another update at 7 o'clock this evening. A Whakarewarewa spokeswoman says motorists should expect a much slower journey along the highway even if after it reopens. It's 4 minutes past 5. New Zealand may not have to wait long for medal success at the Birmingham Commonwealth Games, with Hayden Wilde one of the favourites in the men's triathlon. Bridget Tunnicliffe reports from Birmingham.
After claiming bronze at last year's Olympics, Wilde has dominated the event this year. He's ranked number 1 in the World Series after winning races in Leeds and Hamburg. His closest rival is England's Alex Yee, the man he finished just behind in Tokyo. Taylor Reid and Dylan McCulloch are the other men competing, while Nicole Vanderkay and two-time Games bronze medalist Andrea Hansen are in the women's race. Ainsley Thorpe was forced to withdraw after catching COVID. The men's and women's rugby sevens teams start the defence of their titles. Both hockey teams are in action. Dame Sophie Pascoe is one of 5 swimmers in action at the pool, and the track cycling program starts.
All Blacks halfback Aaron Smith is steering clear of criticism of New Zealand rugby by former coach Sir Steve Hansen. In the wake of the home series loss to Ireland, Hansen says the relationship between the NZR board and the players is the worst it's ever been. But Smith, who is a players' representative with the Players Association, wasn't getting drawn into the debate as the side departed for South Africa today.
I only really saw the headline, to be honest, mate. I was at home in the grill with my kids, and I was yesterday doing all my training and I saw a little glimpse of it, but I can't comment on what was said.
The All Blacks' first test against the Springboks is on Sunday week. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, historian Jamie Bellich's very big book about the catastrophe and the renaissance brought about by the Black Death of the 14th century. Costume designer Catherine Martin on getting the look of Elvis Presley for the new Baz Luhrmann movie, and Fa Moana Luafutu on the intergenerational damage the state inflicted on him and his children by means of the institution supposed to make him a better person. Ko Kim Hillaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
RNZ National, funded through New Zealand On Air. Here's the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland to Taumaranui, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Partly cloudy with isolated showers, rain developing in Northland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty tomorrow night. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, but scattered rain in Gisborne tomorrow night. Taranaki and Taihape to Kapiti, occasional rain or showers. Wellington, Wairarapa and Nelson, mainly fine, but showers developing about Wellington and Wairarapa this evening. Periods of rain for tomorrow, possibly heavy. For Bulla and Western, showers clearing this evening, rain developing north of Hokitika tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine for you, but a few showers about Canterbury this evening. Rain developing tomorrow with snow above 200 metres in the north. Southland and Fiordland, scattered rain clearing this evening. A few showers for tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers, then rain tomorrow night. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi e ho, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint e tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. An Australian tourist who fell into a geothermal sinkhole in Rotorua and her husband are being offered help by the local tourism body. The woman suffered serious burns yesterday but is in a stable condition in Rotorua Hospital. Leah Tebbit reports.
It's one of the city's main geothermal tourist attractions and has closed indefinitely after the ground collapsed under a woman yesterday afternoon. As the woman walked into the entrance of the village, the cobbled path that skirts around steaming hot pools gave way underneath her. Locals said it was shocking.
Just walking along, it just walked straight over and straight through, and the old guy that was there jumped in to try to save her, and it was a 2 metre drop like from here to there.
Where the collapse happened, one of my queers lives pretty much 500 metres away from it, and my other queer lives 800 metres away from it. It was quite scary because I actually live in there, so I was just wondering if my whānau were okay.
GNS Volcanologist Brad says geothermal sinkholes are common in the area.
It's possibly a little bit on the larger size than normal, but it's not exceptional. There are maybe 10 or 15 collapse holes within 100 metres of a similar size. It's quite spectacular, but it's not standing out as being particularly oversized.
Destination Rotorua Chief Executive Andrew Wilson says they are offering assistance, such as accommodation, to the family. He says the active geothermal environment is unpredictable and tourism operators work hard to ensure people's safety.
It is a reminder that, this is a pretty active geothermal region. So, but, certainly no one ever wishes to see anyone get injured, let alone a visitor.
Whakarewarewa village is closed while WorkSafe investigates. Its officials at the scene today declined to speak to media. The village offers self-guided tours on some nature trails as well as guided tours, something Mr Wilson says may be looked at in the investigation.
Our operators really do work really hard to ensure that people are safe. So many of them, will only ever operate with guides for that reason. So, that's only going to be a bit of a conversation I think will emerge probably as WorkSafe begin their piece and start to investigate it.
Mr Wilson says it's too early to say if the accident will put visitors off, but close to half the region's recent visitors have been from overseas, many from Australia and the US. Rotorua District Council says other roads in the village will be checked as a precaution.
And joining us now is GNS Volcanologist Brad Scott. Brad, I know you've been down to have a look at this. Can you just give us a bit of a description? Is it spouting steam? Is the hole empty? What does it look like?
Yeah, good evening, Lisa. No, it's actually very, very passive. The steam emission from the collapsed hole is really quite passive, and you can actually, see quite well into it.
And what can you see?
Basically, it's sort of got vertical walls. It's about 2.5 metres by 3.5 metres at the surface. And to the northeast, it goes down to somewhere between 3 and 4 metres deep, sort of undermining, part of the roadway to the north.
Yeah, and how does it do that? Because obviously we know that there were cobblestones over the top and there's a roadway, which is some pretty serious construction. So how does this actually burst to the surface?
Yeah, these geothermal collapse holes basically form from hydrothermal alteration. You've got hot steam rising, mixing with the local groundwater. That makes an acid. That acid water and the steam basically turns the rock and soils into clay, and then we have high-intensity short-term rainfall events that washes the clay out of the country and starts creating a cavity. And over a period of years to a decade, enough material is turned into clay, washed away, and a cavity forms and propagates to the surface.
Brad, a couple of things there. Is the acid what would burn someone, or would it be the steam?
I would think it's more so the steam, the heat in the steam would create a burn. The chemistry of the groundwater is pretty similar to many of the baths that people soak in Rotorua, so that's not an issue from that respect.
And when you say it undermines those hard surfaces, a hole of this size, how long would have that been brewing for?
It would probably be in the term of years. It's not days and weeks, months. It's more likely to be years.
I know there's been some bad weather up and down the country. Would that have accelerated the process? Heavy rain there?
Yeah, definitely. The final collapse of it would have been related to the short-term high-intensity rainfalls just in the last few days. But as I say, the process of making the hole is something that's been going on for a long, long time. But definitely rainfall is part of the process. It's what has to wash the clays away.
And there are more in the area?
Any of the geothermal systems that have got high temperature heat flow, a lot of steam coming to the surface, that's a remedy. That's the area where that could happen. It's a possibility in those sort of areas.
Yeah. So is this the only hole that exists there at the moment, or are there others in the same area that are repairing?
No, there are many collapse features in this part of Waka. It's quite a common sort of feature. So as I said earlier, maybe within 100 metres there'd be something like 10 or 15 features that are similar size.
Do you anticipate, does it keep growing, or what happens?
No, normally once they've collapsed and sort of they form an equilibrium, and then they stay relatively static for a very long, long time.
Obviously, this accident is terrible. I'm just wondering, are there any warning signs that you can watch out for, or does this thing just appear out of the blue?
Generally, there can be some sort of subtle collapse occur beforehand, but you need to have a pretty intimate knowledge of the area and sort of be someone that's walking through there, daily or quite regular, to notice the change in the area. In this particular case, there was some deformation of the cobblestones that started maybe a week, 10 days ago, but it was only affecting like 4 or 5 cobbles, and that gives no indication of the size of the hole or the problem that was going to manifest itself.
So, to your trained eye, though, Brad, the undermining of those 4 or 5 cobbles, would that have been a kind of red flag to you?
Not necessarily a red flag, but it's an indicator that something may be amiss.
And so, how do you know if it's safe then?
That's really a question you need to put to an engineering geologist. People that look at engineering properties and collapse. So that's a little bit out of my area.
No, I understand, Brad. Thanks for joining us. That is Brad Scott, who's a volcanologist with GNS Science. It is 5:15. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. As schools head back for term 3, experts are warning parents and teachers to watch out for long COVID symptoms in children. While research suggests it's less likely for a child to get long COVID, there are calls for symptoms to be recognised and for funding into research. Louise Tanuth reports.
After a family wedding in March this year, Becca's family all caught COVID. She has 4 children. 2 of them have fully recovered, but her 3 and 7-year-old are still battling debilitating symptoms almost 5 months on.
My 7-year-old especially was really quite fatigued afterwards. The first set of school holidays he just spent on the couch, not wanting to get up and do anything. My 3-year-old, she had the same thing, ongoing fatigue. She had quite an issue with a really testy cough that lasted for honestly about 4 months, and then both of them had issues with chest pain. My 3-year-old said, my heart's beating funny.
For months, her 7-year-old son couldn't go back to school. Now the only solution is half a day at school, followed by resting at home. She says it's been frustrating navigating the kids' symptoms with so much unknown.
I've taken them to the doctor a few times. To me, it didn't feel like anything was investigated much. Like no one's kind of said, right, obviously this has been going on for quite a while. Maybe we could try putting some of these things in place to help you. Like, with the half days at school, that was me talking to the principal. Like that didn't come from anywhere else.
Dr. Anna Brooks is studying long COVID in adults here. She says while children are less likely to get long COVID, it's definitely happening. But their symptoms may be different.
We're hearing more about rashes or having a sore tummy, sore legs, generally being sort of grumpy, and behavioural issues, things that could be quite difficult to pick up.
And that makes it extremely difficult for young kids to return to usual if it's not picked up by teachers or parents. Dr. Brooks says it should be the same advice for children after having the virus. Don't rush back into exercise.
You can imagine in a small child it would be very difficult if they have brain fog or that cognitive impairment. How on earth does a little child explain that? With little athletes, we want to keep encouraging as much resting as possible.
Dr. Greg Williams is a paediatrician at Starship Hospital. He's echoing that advice but says they're seeing children recover from COVID much quicker than adults.
When you think of COVID and those of our community who are most affected by it, age and older age is a big risk factor. Also, the presence of other health conditions that particularly affect older people is another big risk factor. So that seems to be protective.
He says if symptoms are lingering or new symptoms develop 4 to 6 weeks after having the virus, that's when an appointment needs to be made. But he says there's still so much unknown when patients come through their doors.
I think we're still waiting to find out why that is. It's going to be really helpful as these studies help us find out more about why some people are affected for a long term after an illness like this.
To date, there are currently no studies looking into long COVID in children in New Zealand. For families like Becca's, some answers couldn't come soon enough.
Especially because this is happening to people now, and research obviously takes takes time, and if you're only sort of starting research now, it's still going to be a long time before those findings come out. Things can be changed and put in place.
Checkpoint has approached the Ministry of Health to ask whether there are plans to fund any studies in the future.
Let the Games begin. Birmingham in the UK has come alive for the Commonwealth Games with a big Kiwi contingent competing. Felicity Reid has more from there.
The Games are officially open here in Birmingham, and although a number of New Zealand friends and family have come across to support the Kiwi athletes, the locals are getting into it too, and I caught up with a few of them.
So we've just come from Sinkhole field, that's where we live, because we want to try and look for the statues of Peri around the town.
As a family, is that quite a cool thing to be able to do, to have an event like this in your city?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's really fun, isn't it?
What do you guys think of that?
I like... What we're going to see tomorrow? The netball for my birthday present.
A little further along the Games route that links the venues is the merchandise store, where manager Ash has been helping people take a bit of the Games home with them.
Today we launched our opening ceremony pin badges and they're literally nearly gone, you can see. Our best sellers are actually on a full unit, so the whole unit is what sold the best since we launched our first store. So I'll take you over there. So everything on this big unit, starting from that end to all the way around, is a bestseller, and it sold out twice and come back into store twice, and it will sell out again.
Just outside the store was Trevor from Carrickfergus in Northern Ireland and his adult family.
I'm a big fan of the opening ceremonies. You know, I love them, and I like the swimming and athletics.
Have you been to a Commonwealth Games before?
Yes, I've been to two before, when they were in Manchester and Glasgow. We were at the London Olympic opening ceremonies a few years ago. I think I've started saving for the Olympics opening ceremony in Paris.
On the other side of the city is Smithfield. Once home to the Birmingham wholesale markets, the 14-hectare site was cleared in 2018 to make way for 3,000 new homes. Before those homes get built, the space will host the beach volleyball, 3x3 basketball, and be a festival site for the duration of the Games. Maxine Harris's small family-run supermarket, Chilli Billy, overlooks the development.
The city's certainly smartened itself up to meet all these new people coming in, and everywhere looks quite vibrant and colourful, so yes, I'm hoping it'll do us a lot of good.
Parked outside at Chilli Billy is a National Express bus. The company missed out on the contract for the Games. That went to Stagecoach. But those on board are still optimistic.
My name's Kam Singh. I'm a driver trainer officer working for National Express.
Is there a bit more energy around the city at the moment with all these people coming in?
Yeah, most definitely. A lot more people with smiles on their faces, a lot of bubbly people bouncing off the walls as well with what's going on. So yeah, we want to make the most of it. We want to show Birmingham is one of the best cities around, and it's the place to be.
And do you think having a Commonwealth Games or a big event like this will make much difference to the city?
Yeah, it's definitely going to bring a boost to the city itself. There's been a lot of development for the Commonwealth Games, such as the aquatics that are happening up towards Londonderry, Queen's Head. So even when the Commonwealth Games is over in Birmingham, it's going to be helping the local communities, providing a much larger swimming baths, local leisure, fitness. It's going to bring a lot of that to the city as well.
As for the sporting action, the New Zealand male gymnasts are underway in the arena behind me here as one of 9 New Zealand sports in action overnight. Across 11 days of competition, the large New Zealand team will be trying to improve on the 46 medals they won at the last Games, including 15 gold medals.
Gotta love the Birmingham accent. And the first medal prospect this evening is Hayden Wild in the triathlon, which gets underway at 10 p.m. It is 23 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know if you're experiencing long COVID symptoms and if you have children and if they have symptoms after having COVID. We'd love to hear from you. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. Bystanders and staff heard cries for help when a visitor fell into a deep steam-filled geothermal sinkhole at the popular Whakarewarewa village in Rotorua yesterday. The attraction is closed while investigations take place, and the Australian woman is in a serious but stable condition in Rotorua Hospital. Health NZ Te Whatu Ora has been in a closed-door meeting today discussing some of the biggest issues facing the health system as hospitals delay surgeries amid a struggle to deal with winter demand, COVID-19 and staff shortages. The chair, Rob Campbell, says dealing with workforce shortages is its top priority. Initiatives are set to be announced next week. The media company NZME Radio has apologised to the fiancé of the Prime Minister, Clark Gayford, and paid him an undisclosed sum after it aired comments about him being the subject of criminal charges it now accepts as untrue. The road where a bus and car crashed this afternoon in North Canterbury will remain closed for the next few hours. Whakarewarewa says the police serious crash unit is investigating the collision on State Highway 1 near Clarence at about 1 o'clock. The Timaru District Council has issued an urgent notice asking people to conserve water as the town continues to recover from the latest bout of heavy rain. The council says it's been unable to take enough water from either of its usual sources to meet demand. It's 24 minutes past 5.
Ngā mihi marama. The health system is under massive strain and the new entity tasked with fixing it says workforce shortages are at the top of its list. But a month into its new existence, Health New Zealand, Te Whatu Ora, doesn't have any targets for how many new health staff it wants to bring on board. Rosie Gordon reports.
Outside Wellington Hospital, ambulances come and go. Inside, doctors and nurses are flat out and under pressure. Non-urgent surgeries are being delayed, there are staff shortages, and available ICU beds are hard to come by. For these hospital workers, keeping up with major demand is front of mind.
Well, I work here, so that's all I see really. It is stressful, but at the same time, we do tend to learn how to problem solve.
So I'm a nurse myself, especially Wellington Hospital. They're so overworked and understaffed, it's not funny.
What's it like being a nurse at the moment?
Very stressful.
I actually work at the hospital. The latest that's going around work is nurses being poached by, going over to Aussie and stuff like that.
The public is worried about the strain on the system and its staff too.
Doctors and nurses being overworked and underpaid and people not being able to get the access to care that they need.
I mean, they should put more money into the health system.
Just ridiculously long wait times to see psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, all of that. I'm currently getting private therapy and it's costing me a lot.
The bottom line really is they need more pay because in Australia they get more and it's fairly easy to be able to go across to Australia.
Others remain frustrated that patients can get different access to healthcare depending on where they live.
I'm from Hawke's Bay and there's huge delays and it's difficult to even get an appointment with the doctor.
Health NZ Te Whatu Ora is a month into a big job, transforming Aotearoa's health system, making it more equitable and accessible. The board met behind closed doors today. Afterwards, Chair Rob Campbell agreed getting staff to fill gaps was the first hurdle.
It sounds a bit trite. Workforce is really the answer.
Just how that will be done is yet to be revealed. Rob Campbell says initiatives will be announced next week. No detail yet on what they might entail. He admits they don't yet have a target for how many nurses and doctors need to be brought into the system or by when.
It will honestly be wasting times arguing the toss about how many hundreds it is or how many thousands it is in various roles. The numbers are big, they're very pressing. And we've just got to get on and knock it. When we get closer to what might be a target, we can talk about targets. A target, frankly, right now wouldn't help us.
So will nurses and doctors get a pay rise under the new health system? Margie Upper, the CEO at Whatu Ora, says they're sticking with the current employment agreements.
We have current MECAS arrangements in place and we also have a national process for assessing where we do need to support or fund or pay additional REM where we are finding it hard to find full rosters.
So does Health Minister Andrew Little have confidence Te Whatu Ora's board can turn around the crisis in health?
Well, it's their job to do that. Not every problem can be fixed straight away, so it'll be a combination of short-term and long-term fixes.
The public will have to wait until next week to find out what some of those fixes might be.
Meanwhile, health officials hope a new private hospital will help relieve the backlog of people waiting for surgery in Hawke's Bay. Kaweka Hospital in Hastings held its official opening today. The health minister was there and says he's not worried about the private sector poaching staff from the desperately short-staffed public hospitals. Our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen has the story.
Andy Darley is an ear, nose and throat surgeon.
He says Hawke's Bay has suffered from massive long waiting lists for elective surgeries. His department at the public hospital hadn't increased the time it had for surgeries in 35 years.
So we couldn't provide the needs of the community. About 2/3 of our patients were being turned away, and we needed somewhere bigger, somewhere new, and somewhere up to date.
He thinks the new gear at Kaweka Hospital is world class.
The operating theatre is much bigger. It means you can move around in it better. The kit is the latest kit, which all means that the staff within theatre can do the very best job for the patients.
The public hospital in Hawke's Bay currently has around 2,700 people waiting for elective surgeries. Over 1,300 have been waiting more than 4 months. It's hoped there will be positive change, taking a bit of stress off the under-resourced public hospital, which is just over the road. The expectation is between 1,000 and 1,500 surgeries a year. Kaweka Hospital's Managing Director Colin Hutchison says the world over is facing huge health problems.
Across the world, we've got an ageing population with huge health needs, and most governments are struggling to invest around the countries as required.
He says that's been the case in Hawke's Bay.
There's been a lack of surgical facilities for many years, and so as a group of senior doctors here in Hawke's Bay, we've just taken it upon ourselves to actually problem solve, and we've raised about $35 million from Hawke's Bay families to build this new surgical facility.
They expect about 30 to 50 patients a day. There's 4 large operating rooms and 10 inpatient beds. A 3-storey building next door is on its way and should be ready by 2025. That'll feature a 31-bed ward along with intensive care, a full radiology suite, a cardiology lab and about 50 outpatient rooms. Despite the huge health worker shortage, Dr Hutchison says they haven't had any trouble finding staff.
Recruitment's gone really well. We've got an amazing leadership team, so they've been able to attract high-quality staff. And across both the nursing staff and the technicians, we've been delighted with the calibre of candidates that have joined us.
Health Minister Andrew Little was there to cut the ribbon. He says he's not worried about private hospitals poaching staff available for the public. The key is training new nurses.
We have roughly 8,000 nursing students in the country at the moment. We produce about between 1,800 and 1,900 nurse graduates a year. And right now we offer places to every nurse graduate into our public system.
He thinks this hospital should scale some of those long wait times back.
As all public hospitals are looking at how they deal with their long waiting lists, having partnerships with private hospitals is one way to do that. So there's now options here for the local hospital to partner with Kaweka Hospital to help alleviate some of those waiting lists.
The first operation at Kaweka will be in a month, on August the 29th. Te Whatu Ora Hawke's Bay, which runs the public hospital, says it's looking forward to working with Kaweka for the benefits of the community.
It's 28 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And it is time for the business news. Ko taku hoe e nai called Giles Beckford, who joins us from the Wellington studio. Hey, Giles, are we smashing to the rock bottom in terms of misery? A couple of surveys seem to suggest we might be.
Kia ora to you, Lisa. Well, I'm not quite sure.
Happy Friday, Giles.
Oh, yes, of course. Tidings of, was it comfort and good joy or whatever it is? Look, we've had 2 surveys from the ANZ Bank. They come out monthly. One's looking at the business sector and one looks at consumers. They come back to back. In both of them, sentiment is still deeply pessimistic, but there was a slight improvement. In other words, we were a touch less gloomy this month. And that suggests that perhaps we may have hit the bottom. A couple of wee things just as an indication. One is people's expectations of inflation were actually a little bit lower. In other words, they basically think inflation may be at its peak. And from that point of view, that will please the Reserve Bank because it wants to shape people's thinking about inflation and their behaviour as businesses and as consumers. And that would suggest that the rises in the cash rate are really starting to bite and have an effect there are more to come. We'll see them go, the rates go up at least another 3 times this year, we would expect. 4% for the cash rate by the end of the year. But in both those surveys, it's not quite immutably gloomy as it has been. And so, it's still, I think, an open question as to whether the economy falls into recession, as in fact the US economy has done, maybe for us towards the end of this year or possibly the beginning of next year as activity slows down. But just a couple of little green shoots, and I think it depends on your point of view, whether you're a person who looks at the glass half full or the glass half empty. At this stage, the jury's out, but yeah, there's something here just to say it's not all down in the mouth.
And Giles, this next one is interesting. The second-hand car company that's, had a bit of a, ongoing stoush there. Now, the small shareholders group is joining in.
Yes, a few weeks ago, or a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned NZ Automotive Investments, who are one of the bigger second-hand car companies in the country. They're listed on the stock exchange. The principal shareholder there, a man called David Senna, was moving to dump 3 of the board, 3 of the directors on the board, saying really, he wanted people on there who could drive the company forward, bring it back to profitability, turn it around, bring along growth. On the other side, the directors all resigned in advance, saying, we can't work with this major shareholder. We have no trust or confidence in him. It's better that we're not there. Well, Mr. Senna put up 3 people to replace them, and the company's annual meeting is a little later in the month. The Shareholders Association, which basically waves the flag for small shareholders, folks like you and I who may have actually bought or inherited a few hundred shares in companies. And they're saying to small shareholders, you can't have any confidence if the major shareholder nominates the directors that will control the board. In other words, they're not independent. And they're saying that really any listed company should have a majority of independent directors who are out there looking for the interests overall of all shareholders, not just for the big shareholder. So the Shareholders Association, being a bit more activist, being a bit more high profile in these sorts of cases, is saying to anybody who's a shareholder, a small shareholder in NZ Automotive Investments, give us your proxies or come along to the annual meeting. We're going to oppose these directors that are put up by the major shareholder. We want basically a level playing field. We want independent voices, independent scrutiny and executive leadership. It's shaping up to be quite an interesting little stoush. And we're seeing a bit more of this in New Zealand companies where, in fact, small shareholders, with the help of the likes of the Shareholders Association, are saying, we're not actually going to get trampled over anymore by big shareholders, whether it be big institutional shareholders or just dominant individuals.
And an end-of-week womble around the markets, Giles?
Womble, we've had another stonking day on the share market, which has gained 164 points. It's about 1.4% now at a 2-month high, just a whisker under 11,500. For the currency, 63.1 US, 90 Australian, 51.7 British pence. And if you're bored and need something to do tomorrow in Auckland and looking for a job, you might go along to Auckland Airport where they're having a job fair. 3,000 jobs on offer.
Really interesting. Hey, we've got a business story coming up, Giles. Controversial. Hot cross buns, only at Easter, or would you like to eat them all year round?
No, I think only at Easter. I mean, I get disappointed when I see them in January, and I'm really disappointed when I see them being called, was it flavoured buns or currant buns in October? So I'm a traditionalist, and I say, food, seasonal food for seasonal celebrations.
All right, well, the next one's for you, Giles. Thanks for joining us. That's Giles Beckford, live from Wellington. Hot cross buns are usually reserved for Easter, but one Auckland bakery's had such high demand for their custom recipe, they're now making them all year round. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi paid them a visit.
It's 11 a.m. and NZ Bakery on Dominion Road in Mount Eden has just 2 packets of hot cross buns left. The shop's full of loaves, pastries and pies, but it's the fruity buns flying off shelves.
I make 2 trays, 20 packets or something. They almost run out. I have only 2 packets at the moment.
Owner Chaminder's been a baker for 28 years. But this bakery only opened last year, and this is where the hot cross buns for all seasons began.
I research all the recipes and I create my own recipe, and then they're really successful. I do need to stop that one, but customers always ask, Chaminda, can you make, please, we need, keep going. That's why I'm doing that.
His secret is not so simple.
It's volume spices and mixing time, because we have a big four, we need to follow that one. Water temperature, mixing time, dough resting time, proving time, and the baking, right temperature baking, all including that.
There's 7 staff on the team, but Chaminda's the sole baker. It's not easy making about 240 buns every day by yourself.
I have to wake up 3 in the morning every day. I'm finishing 1:30, 2 o'clock, and maybe sometime 3 o'clock.
But no matter what, they always sell out, with regular customers stocking up their freezers or new ones who've heard the news. And for those that say the buns should only be eaten at Easter, Chaminda has some thoughts.
It's just a traditional. People can enjoy whole year.
The bakery has no plans on slowing down with the buns, as long as there's the appetite for them.
Whoa, what do you reckon? Hot cross buns all year round, or does that make you hot and cross thinking about it? I don't know, they're yummy, currenty goodness. Just call them a bun, take the cross off the top. It is 20 minutes to 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening, but I am particularly interested in your thoughts on hot cross buns all year round, whether you're for it or against it and why. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I am anticipating some strong opinions on this one. It is about time to head to the headlines. Ane amarama mina pitipiti kōrero.
Thank you, Lisa, and I'm for it all year round, I say, with butter and jam. Okay, here's our headlines. Green MP Julianne Genter will not be standing for the party's vacant co-leadership position. Nominations to fill the role opened last night after James Shaw was narrowly ousted by party delegates last weekend. The head of international efforts to cut climate emissions is calling on the New Zealand government to do better and honour its pledge to halve emissions. The president of the United Nations Climate Change Conference has been meeting with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and other politicians and officials. Taiwan has thanked US President Joe Biden for telling his Chinese counterpart that Washington remains opposed to any action that changes the status of the self-governing island. In a statement, it said Taiwan would continue to deepen its security partnership with the US. An Auckland developer says there is a massive shortage of construction workers and thousands of jobs are being advertised. Oka Managing Director Mark Todd says skilled workers have been leaving the country for better opportunities. The owner of a website muddling links to Auckland mayoral candidates appears to be a young Nat. Anyone visiting fsocollins.co.nz or craiglord.co.nz found themselves redirected to the website of rival candidate Leo Molloy. The Domain Name Commission lists a Tristram Speedy as the contact, a person who, according to LinkedIn, is Secretary and Deputy Chair of the Northern Young Nats. It's 5:41.
Thanks, Marama. A young Nat appears to be behind the creation of fake mayoral contender websites that all link back to Leo Molloy. The National Party says it's got nothing to do with local body elections and its youth wing is staying silent. But the contenders for the city's top job aren't. Ane te kai ripoata, Finn Blackwell.
The domain name mystery emerged last week when anyone visiting fsocollins.co.nz or craiglord.co.nz found themselves redirected to the website of rival candidate Leo Molloy. Mr. Molloy denied he had any involvement. After receiving a complaint, the Domain Name Commission looked into it. It now lists Tristram Speedy of Auckland as the contact, a person who, according to LinkedIn, is Secretary and Deputy Chair of the Northern Young Nats. Leo Molloy says he doesn't know Mr. Speedy, and frankly, he doesn't care.
We don't stop for barking dogs. We don't listen to that sort of stuff. So no, didn't register on our radar.
He says he's glad to see so much engagement in local body politics.
I'd expect every ratepayer, every resident to have a strong opinion about it, so I'm not surprised and I'm enjoying it.
Efeso Collins says the debacle distracts from the bigger issues.
I
think it's so unnecessary, and it just strikes the people who are desperate to mislead the public during this campaign. Look, I said at the beginning that I took Leo's word on face value. He said he wasn't involved, and I said, yeah, I completely accept that.
He says he'll continue to fight for the Super City's mayoralty fairly.
I'm a sportsman too. I've played sports all my life, and you get out on the field and on the court, you play hard, but you play fair, and I think that's what's lacking.
Craig Lord says if anyone affiliated with the youth wing of the National Party was involved, it's a worry.
Well, they shouldn't be involved with it. It's nothing to do with them. And for a young Nat to decide to do that is they're not really staying in their lane.
He's also looking to keep the race above board.
I think a lot of the dirty pool will still come out. It's not a game I'm going to play. I'll stick to my style that I've kept for the last 4 years, and that's play the ball and not the man.
The Domain Name Commission manages and registers .co.nz websites. Its interim commissioner, Isabel Egerton, says they are committed to ensuring the .nz domain space is safe and secure. Mr. Speedy told RNZ he would neither confirm or deny he was involved with the domain and declined to comment further.
It is almost 6:15. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A number of you getting in touch on Te Whatu Ora not having any targets for how many new health staff it wants to recruit. Paul says it's so good to hear someone standing up to the lottery of setting targets. Most of them are never met, and it just gives people something to moan about. On the other hand, this person would like us to ask a question of Health New Zealand. How is a new private hospital in Hawke's Bay going to help alleviate surgery waiting lists? The surgeons that work in public will walk over the road and earn more in private. How does that equate to more surgery? They ask. On the issue of long COVID and potentially long COVID being suffered by children, John from Gisborne has got in touch to say, my wife and 3 kids have had long COVID for over a year. My 2 girls haven't been able to do hardly any school work or ride their horses or anything for a year. Recovery is very, very slow. It is devastating. There is a good Facebook support group, says John. Another listener says, I got COVID in March. From April, I have had many episodes of severe all-body hives and am currently under an immunologist and on antihistamines. The professor feels it's an autoimmune reaction to having had COVID. And another listener says, I've had long COVID symptoms and the body tremors is still there. On the Com Games, JT's got in touch to say, it's not a Birmingham accent, Lisa, it's a Brummie accent. Yeah, you're right. Do keep your feedback coming. Let us know your thoughts on hot cross buns all year round. I know you'll have them. Text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The head of the organisation tasked with cutting climate gases globally says New Zealand must follow through on its promise to halve emissions and look at doing more. COP26 President and UK Conservative Party MP Alok Sharma is in Aotearoa after attending the Pacific Islands Forum. Speaking exclusively to RNZ, he told our climate reporter Hamish Cardwell all nations must get moving on emissions reduction plans.
The 2 big sectors in terms of emissions here, of course, are agriculture and transport. And I think what I'm sure, certainly based on the discussions I've had, the government is going to be working on and thinking about is how you accelerate the emissions reductions in those sort of big sectors. But as I said, this is a consistent message that I'm delivering to every country. So far, we've had 16 countries come forward with revised emissions reduction targets for 2030. I know there are some big G20 countries as well, which will come forward by the end of this year. But everyone needs to play their part.
New Zealand has a fairly unique, in some ways, emissions profile. Agriculture is really quite high up there. In your conversations today, were you satisfied that New Zealand is doing enough in the agricultural space to bring down emissions?
Well, there is a plan that New Zealand has, and I know ministers are very focused on this. I think the key issue, though, is about implementation and execution. And again, as I said, this is a consistent message that I'm delivering to every single country, is that commitments have been made. New Zealand, of course, also has a commitment of net zero by 2050. And we need to make sure, each of us needs to make sure that we are on the pathway to getting to net zero by 2050. And if that means that countries over time look again at their NDCs, look again at individual sectors to see how they can speed that up, then of course they will want to do that.
You mentioned that the UK has made emissions reductions. New Zealand hasn't. Our Prime Minister declared a climate change emergency. Big news this week is there is a court case going on because our government let onshore exploration continue despite banning offshore. That's despite the International Energy Agency saying to have any hope of staying below, catastrophic levels, we need to stop digging stuff out of the ground. Does she need to take a leaf out of your book in terms of the strength of her conviction and say, I stake my job on the need for true action?
Well, you are talking about an ongoing legal issue. I don't want to comment on that specifically. You'll understand the reasons I don't want to do that. Let me make a more general point, which is that I do not think that all of our long-term futures lie in fossil fuels. And what we need to be really careful about when we make decisions about future energy policy is to ensure that what we are not doing is locking in long-term emissions. At the end of the day, countries have made strong commitments in terms of getting to net zero by 2050 or the middle of the century. And I think when decisions are made, they need to be seen through that prism and to be consistent with the legally binding climate commitments that countries have made. When we took on the mantle of organising COP26, less than 30% of the global economy was covered by a net zero target. By the time we got to COP26 last year, it was over 90%. And so what we need to ensure is that countries stay true to the commitments that they have made.
That's the COP26 President Alok Sharma speaking exclusively to our climate reporter Hamish Cardwell. Residents of a Whakarewarewa beachside township have been without power for 3 days and want action. 15 Whakarewarewa Rise residents lost power on Wednesday morning after floodwaters caused an electricity box to start smoking. 9 have since had their connection restored, but the community warns it will happen again if nothing is done. Our reporter Somya Barmedi-Pati and cameraman Angus Drever have the story.
It started with a downpour a week ago, which filled the lakes meant to act as a catchment for heavy rains. Overflowing water has pooled in low-lying areas, flooding an electricity box, meaning lines company Electra had to turn the power off. But Elizabeth Valentine and her partner Michael Portman say the problem's been around much longer.
We've been residents in Wakatete Place since 2016, and we first became aware of flooding in this particular paddock here, which has got an outflow from the artificially created lake in 2017, and it's just got progressively worse.
Mr Portman says he contacted the council a week ago, warning them of rising water levels, but says he was told they were on their own. While more drainage in the subdivision could solve the problem in the short term, the couple wants to see more forward planning for the area.
The long-term solution here obviously has to be what's happened in the rest of Whakarewarewa, where they have curbing stormwater channeling and those outlets go directly to the ocean. There's none of that infrastructure in place in this estate, and that needs to be implemented ASAP, I think.
Their neighbour Julie Calcott agrees better stormwater management is urgently needed.
Somebody's got to do something because I certainly don't know what to do. I don't think most of us know what to do. There's no power, so we're on septic tanks that are run by power, so there's no power to that. So there's no showers, there's no washing, there's no water for anything really.
Roger Truebridge from developer Truebridge Associates declined to be interviewed, but told us his company started pumping out water yesterday out of the goodness of his heart. He says the electricity box flooded because a resident dug a channel from the nearby lake, though this is disputed by the residents. Mr Truebridge also pointed out there'd been an unprecedented amount of rain. But over on Kānuka Drive, Rob Davidson says water ponding has been an issue at the development for years. He says he kicked up a fuss before building on his house began, and developers subsequently raised the ground.
Poor design by the developer and the council obviously not checking it and making sure it was done properly. That's what they get paid for, that's what they're supposed to do, and as far as I'm concerned it's gone through and they need to act on it. They own the responsibility of it, not us.
But Horowhenua District Council Chief Executive Monique Davidson says landowners are responsible for dealing with stormwater as per their consent conditions. She says the council is supporting affected residents and won't be thinking about a long-term solution until the current problem is solved.
Now, that's not something that will necessarily fall on the shoulders of council, but certainly, council in a coordination role will absolutely look to understand how we can discuss those matters, not only with homeowners, but also the developer.
Ms Davidson couldn't comment on whether the area would be rezoned as residential to ensure stormwater provisions are in place. Meanwhile, residents are left mopping up today and wondering what will come tomorrow, with hundreds more homes slated for the area in future.
And if you were listening to that on radio, do go to our website. We'll post the video there. Kia ora koutou katoa, a phrase Dr Ashley Bloomfield uttered more than 300 times as he fronted COVID media conferences through the last 2.5 years. His image was turned into tea towels and tote bags as he became something of a cult figure during the pandemic. Today, his last day in the job, leaving the role, he says he has given his all. Samuel Rilstone reports.
From Alpha.
So New Zealand has 3 new cases of COVID-19.
To Delta.
There are now a further 2 cases of COVID-19 to report in the community.
And then Omicron.
So today we're reporting 23,183 new cases of COVID.
Dr Ashley Bloomfield has been there for it all. But today the Director General of Health says goodbye to COVID briefings and the Ministry of Health. Having been in the role since 2018, Dr Bloomfield bows out today.
I can honestly say it feels like a bit of a burden lifted, yes, because it's just been such an intense and relentless, 2.5 years through the pandemic. I feel like I've given it my everything. And so, yes, the sense of a break over the horizon and the very near horizon now does give me a sense of relief, and that's been nice.
The pandemic has been bruising for everyone, and Dr Bloomfield is no different.
My abiding memory will be of, what a privilege it was to be in this role at this time in this country, and I have great hope for the future of this country based on my experience over the last 4 years.
There have been T-shirts, mugs, memes, pies, tattoos and tea towels. A Kiwi chick was named Bloom in his honour. Needless to say, the doctor has left a lasting impression on New Zealanders.
I think he's amazing. Yeah, I don't think anyone else could have brought the country together on side as well as he did.
I think he's done awesome. I think he's been really transparent and open with the public. I think he's made a real difference. Kind of sad to see him leave. Big shoes to fill, but I think he's been wonderful for New Zealand.
I think he did really well. I love him.
Love Ashley.
Yeah.
Despite the serious nature of his job, Dr Bloomfield has always found time for humour where appropriate. There was a telling eyebrow raise at this comment from former COVID-19 response minister Chris Hipkins.
It is a challenge in higher density areas for people to get outside and to spread their legs when they are when they're surrounded by other people.
As for what he should do next, many hope he won't be straying too far from public service.
He could do anything. He's so well regarded that whatever he wants to do, he can. But have some time off and relax with his family, I think, is probably a good idea to start with.
I hope it's in some capacity where he can influence the public in a positive way. I think he's got a lot to offer New Zealanders in general, so hopefully it's something in that capacity.
There were also plenty of well wishes.
We miss you already. He was awesome. He was really awesome, and I hope he goes on to do more great things.
You've done wonderful, just hope we can see more of you around, and all the best.
And the man himself has posted this message as he leaves his post.
But don't let up now. Keep up the great work. We are not, as I say, out of the woods yet, but we can always see a path through the woods. We've forged our own path. Let's keep doing it. Keep up the great work. Look after each other. Kia ora.
Dr. Ashley Bloomfield signing off there. Do check out the video version of that story. There's some great merchandise that you can see. I think one of the best ones is the Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator poster. On to other topics. Hot cross buns. Boy, oh boy, I've got you hot and some of you cross. Whether we should have them all year round. Liz says yes to hot cross buns all year round. Coming home after 30 years in the UK, I miss them. I'm an atheist and these are a blessing from the deity of great baking. Perfect on a winter morning. Another listener says, have hot cross buns all year round, except for Easter. Take the cross off and call them not cross buns. Chris says hot cross buns or Easter only. Well, I'm a traditionalist and love everything in its rightful season. Pam says hot cross buns are for Easter. Let them be spiced buns until Easter season, then put the crosses on them for Easter. And someone else says, yeah, we've got to do things with the season. So they reckon only hot cross buns at Easter. We are moving too much to all year round for everything, but they're so tasty. This person says they needs to be seasonal for lots of products. Tom's, tomatoes, fruit, veggies, etc. I'm fine with the buns. Just call them uncrossed and don't put the cross on top. Beef a bun, maybe on top, one listener suggests. And from Christchurch, this, totally support hot cross buns, 12 out of 12. New World St Martin's Bakery makes excellent buns all year, except just before Christmas. My morning tea go-to every workday, says Kirsty from Christchurch. Hilary says just leave the cross off the bun, it's just a fruit bun. The cross has lost its significance in today's secular society. Hot cross buns only for Easter, this person says. We need something to look forward to, they reckon. At seasonal holidays. And this other person has said next it will be Christmas all year round. Well, what about when you put up Christmas lights? Should we chuck some up in November? I think that would get you really going, wouldn't it? The ones who are traditionalists and only want the buns at Easter. On the sinkhole in Rotorua, Russell's got in touch to say the sinkholes could be found using ground-penetrating radar along the footpaths and walkways and roads in the area by the council. We were talking to a volcanologist earlier about what warning signs were.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. A volcanologist believes recent heavy rain may have contributed to the collapse of a sinkhole at a Rotorua tourist attraction yesterday. A woman visiting from Australia fell into a sinkhole near the entrance of the Whakarewarewa village, suffering serious burns. The geothermal attraction has closed while WorkSafe and Rotorua Lakes Council investigate. GNS Volcanologist Brad Scott told Checkpoint heavy rain in the area during the preceding days would have sped up deterioration of the surface.
The final collapse of it would have been related to the short-term high-intensity rainfalls just in the last few days. But as I say, the process of making the hole is something that's been going on for a long, long time. But definitely rainfall is part of the process. It's what has to wash the clays away.
Brad Scott says there was little indication in the days leading up to the collapse that there was something wrong. The head of international efforts to cut climate emissions is calling on the New Zealand government to honour its pledge to halve emissions and do better. The president of the United Nations Climate Change Conference, Alok Sharma, has been meeting with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and other ministers, politicians and officials after attending the Pacific Islands Forum. In an exclusive interview with RNZ, he says there is a push for change.
The two big sectors in terms of emissions here, of course, are agriculture and transport. And I think what I'm sure, certainly based on the discussion I've had, the government is going to be working on and thinking about is how you accelerate the emissions reductions in those sort of big sectors.
Alok Sharma says all countries have agreed to have another look at their pledges by the end of the year. A Hawke's Bay doctor says a lack of surgical facilities has led a new private hospital. Kaweka Hospital in Hastings held its official opening today. The public hospital system has been under-resourced and has had much more demand than it can cope with. The ear, nose and throat department has had to turn 2/3 of its people away in recent years. Kaweka Hospital Managing Director Dr Colin Hutchinson says the shortage meant doctors had to act.
There's been a lack of surgical facilities for many years, and so as a group of senior doctors here in Hawke's Bay, we've just taken it upon ourselves to actually problem solve, and we've raised about $35 million from Hawke's Bay families to build this new surgical facility.
The hospital is locally owned and expects to see 30 to 50 patients a day. Its first operation is due to be held in a month. Taiwan has thanked President Joe Biden for telling his Chinese counterpart that Washington remains opposed to any action that changes the status of the self-governing island. The Foreign Ministry in Taipei says it has been briefed by US officials. James Chater is a journalist in Taiwan.
Where they remain more tight-lipped is on the potential visit of Nancy Pelosi. We've been in touch with the Foreign Ministry here right from when this trip was first reported in the Financial Times, and they say they don't reveal any details about trips to Taiwan of figures of this stature. But I think amongst the general public, I would say the response is mixed. I've been speaking with a number of young Taiwanese people about how they view this trip specifically. I had one person say to me that the situation looks self-escalating.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has warned the US against playing with fire over Taiwan. Back home in Auckland, mayoral candidate says a domain name mix-up is a distraction from the big issues of local politics. Anyone loading fsselcollins.co.nz or craiglord.co.nz recently finds themselves redirected to the website of rival candidate Leo Molloy. The Domain Name Commission previously listed the contact for Mr Collins' site as a Leo Molloy. It now lists a Tristram Speedy of Auckland, a person who, according to LinkedIn, is Secretary and Deputy Chair of the Northern Young Nats. Mr Collins says he just wanted to get to the bottom of the whole ordeal.
I think it's so unnecessary, and it just strikes the people who are desperate to mislead the public during this campaign. Look, I said at the beginning that I took Leo's word on face value. He said he wasn't involved, and I said, yeah, I completely accept that.
Tristram Speedy declined to comment. Residents of a Whakarewarewa township who've been without power for 3 days say more should have been done to stop the flooding that caused an electricity box to start smoking. 15 Waitarere Rise residents lost power on Wednesday morning, though 9 have since had their connection restored. Resident Michael Portman says he contacted the council a week ago, warning them of rising water levels, but was told they were on their own.
The long-term solution here obviously has to be what's happened in the rest of Whakarewarewa, where they have curbing stormwater channeling and those outlets go directly to the ocean. There's none of that infrastructure in place in this estate, and that needs to be implemented ASAP.
But Rotorua District Council says the landowners are responsible for dealing with stormwater as per their consent conditions. The Timaru District Council has issued an urgent notice asking people to conserve water as the town continues to recover from the latest bout of heavy rain. The council says it's been unable to take enough water from either of its usual sources to meet demand and is at risk of having to issue a boil water notice. The heavy rain has caused muddy conditions at the water sources. The council is asking people to stop all outdoor water usage and limit domestic use. It says industry and commercial users have also been asked to significantly lower their water use. It's 6:06. The New Zealand triathlete Hayden Wilde is upbeat about his chances of backing up his Olympic bronze medal at the Commonwealth Games. A rising star of the triathlon world, the Whakatane athlete produced an impressive performance last year in Tokyo and is a strong medal prospect in Birmingham tonight. Wilde says the Birmingham is tight and technical, which will suit him.
It's a strength-based race. It's hilly, it's technical, so there's going to be a lot of sharp, short attacks and pinches. So it's going to be a very interesting race. And I think, not being an Olympic distance and a sprint distance, there's going to be guys there that you normally won't see up the front. So it's going to be an interesting one.
Meanwhile, para-swimmer Sophie Pascoe says she's focused on both a medal and mentoring while at the Games. Pascoe has one shot to add to her 4 Commonwealth Games gold medals when she competes in her sole event, the S9 100 metres freestyle overnight.
I hope that I can play that mentor person and that support person for them as an athlete, because sometimes it can be quite daunting, obviously, having to chat to, I suppose, the elders in the group. So the fact that they can feel comfortable coming to an athlete, I like taking on that role.
And other New Zealand athletes also in action on the opening day of competition include the All Blacks and Black Fern Sevens, the men's and women's hockey teams and the track cyclists. Four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel has announced he'll retire from Formula One at the end of the season. The 35-year-old German, who drives for Aston Martin, won his titles with Red Bull from 2010 to 13 and also spent 6 seasons with Ferrari. That's the news.
How does it feel to be part of this project? Just amazing. Really exciting, and it's really wonderful as a Māori Land Trust to be part of something that's quite new. They're out here having the main course, this beautiful grass that we grow, and then go in the shed and have all their dessert.
The Onuku Māori Lands Trust and its $3.5 million investment into sheep milking. Country Life, Friday night at 9 and Saturday morning at 7 on RNZ National.
RNZ National, on air, online and on demand. Back to Lisa Owen and Checkpoint in a minute, but right now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland to Taumaranui, also Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Partly cloudy with isolated showers, rain developing in Northland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty tomorrow night. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine but scattered rain in Gisborne tomorrow night. Taranaki and Taihape to Kapiti, occasional rain or showers. For Wellington, Wairarapa and Nelson, mainly fine but showers developing about Wellington and Wairarapa this evening. Periods of rain for tomorrow, possibly heavy. For Bulla and Westland, showers clearing this evening with rain developing north of Hokitika tomorrow. Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine but a few showers about Canterbury this evening. Rain developing tomorrow with snow above 200 metres in the north. For Southland and Fiordland, scattered rain clearing this evening with a few showers for tomorrow. And for the Chatham Islands, a few showers, then rain tomorrow night. It's 9 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā marama. No mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The 2022 Commonwealth Games opened at the Alexandra Stadium in Birmingham this morning before a crowd of 30,000 people. More than 5,000 athletes from 72 nations and territories will take part over the next 11 days, competing in 19 sports. There are 280 medals up for grabs, and for the first time there are more medals for women than men. The BBC's Nesta McGregor reports.
This time round at least, bike polo isn't one of the 26 sports being showcased. But across Birmingham, projects like this one are benefiting from funding allocated to the host city.
There's probably 8 to 10 cities around the UK that play it. We've spent our money on some equipment, the facilities, our time. We're hoping to do a little tournament at the end, which will have refreshments, first aid. You know, we're kind of trying to have a bit of a party at the end.
More than 5,000 athletes from 72 nations and territories will experience the best in Brummie hospitality. World champion gymnast Joe Fraser already knows it well.
It's not very often you get an opportunity to do a major competition in your back garden, so everyone's buying tickets, you know, everyone wants to support, but now they're going to have the opportunity to see what I've been doing and what I've been grafting for my whole life.
The Commonwealth Games is the first major multi-sport event held in the UK since the COVID pandemic. Reason enough to be excited.
Can't remember the last time that Birmingham hosted something as big as the Commonwealth Games.
I think it was a good use of money. It's definitely bringing a lot more attention to Birmingham, and it is a really good city, so I think it's good that it's getting the attention it deserves.
Makes me proud to be a Brummie. Birmingham is one of the youngest cities in Europe, and it's also one of the most diverse, with large Asian, African and Caribbean communities. And for some, the occasion hasn't lived up to its motto of games for everyone. For example, the organising board was accused of lacking diversity. Changes have been made since.
We, all loyal subjects of His Majesty, will take part in the games in the true spirit of sportsmanship.
Then there are those who say its colonial origins are still being felt today.
At a sensitive time when we know the Windrush scandal hasn't been fully resolved yet, families torn apart, people who spent all their lives here, people who were born in Caribbean countries and African countries and parts of Asia, when the Union flag flew over those countries, being told you have no right to be here, and then we're saying, oh yes, but we embrace our Commonwealth family. It does say double standards.
The Commonwealth Games organisers say they are committed to the event, reflecting the region. The City of Birmingham's official slogan is forward, and ultimately the legacy these games leave behind will be far more important than the medals won.
The Kremlin is keeping quiet on a proposed prisoner swap that would free the most notorious Russian inmate in US custody. The Biden administration is offering to exchange Victor Bout, a convicted arms dealer, for women's basketball star Brittany Griner and a former Marine held in Russia, Paul Whelan. Moscow says there is no deal yet. CNN's Kylie Atwood reports.
Convicted arms trafficker Victor Bout, currently serving a 25-year sentence in the United States.
When arrested, he oversaw operations capable of delivering enough weapons to launch rebellions, fuel revolutions, and slaughter untold thousands of people. He was an accessory to violence on a scale that is beyond comprehension.
And now, according to sources briefed on the matter, the Biden administration has offered to return him as part of a proposed deal for two Americans the United States says are wrongfully detained in Russia, Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan. Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying they've offered a deal to Russia, but not confirming the details.
We put a substantial proposal on the table weeks ago to facilitate their release. Our governments have communicated repeatedly and directly on that proposal.
Though the administration has been loath to engage in prisoner swaps to free American citizens, concerned that countries like Russia could be incentivized to try and hold more Americans, it's one of the few tools that actually work. And now sources say President Biden supports the swap, especially after the last swap between the United States and Russia earlier this year received bipartisan support. Bout is a former Soviet military officer who's been accused of using front companies to funnel Soviet-era weapons into conflict zones like Afghanistan, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, even working with U.S. government contractors in Iraq.
He's a dangerous person. He was one of the most prolific arms dealers in the world. He was convicted in a U.S. federal court in New York of conspiracy to kill Americans.
A far cry from Bout's global arms smuggling operation, Griner has pleaded guilty to bringing less than a gram of cannabis into Russia.
I did not plan or have the intent to bring any cannabis or banned substance to Russia. I do understand what my charges are against me, and with them being accidentally in my bags, I take responsibility.
Griner says she had medical cannabis to treat her pain from numerous sports injuries, and that she accidentally took it with her while she was rushing to pack up for the trip, having recently recovered from COVID. But with Russia's invasion of Ukraine still raging and U.S. sanctions still pressuring Russia's economy, U.S. officials believe the Kremlin is using Griner as a political pawn. The family of Mark Fogel, who was similarly detained for bringing cannabis into Russia that he said was for treating chronic pain, believes he is also being used as a pawn. Last month, he was sentenced to 14 years in a Russian penal colony, though the State Department has not declared Fogel to be wrongfully detained.
14 years in a hard labor camp is essentially a death sentence for him. He's 61 years old and he has a very long history of spinal injury.
It is 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ukrainian soldiers on the front line say the rate of Russia's bombardment of eastern Ukraine has halved thanks to the arrival of sophisticated weapons from the West. But it is merely a lull or a sign that the tide is turning in this brutal war. The BBC's Andrew Harding reports from Donbass.
The familiar sounds of war thunder across Ukraine's front lines. But something is changing here in the Donbass. We're rushing to a secret location and a rare rendezvous with a weapon that might just be helping to tip the balance in this war. The Caesar is a gift from France to Ukraine. Today, its giant gun is aiming at a Russian target 27 kilometers away. 3 shots in just over a minute, then a swift departure. Okay, now we have to get out quickly before the Russians potentially find our positions and fire back. These guns are making all the difference, says Dmitro, the unit commander. We can now hit the Russians more accurately and further away, which means they can only attack us half or a third as often as before. And here's the proof. Footage of giant Russian ammunition stores exploding, hit by Western weapons like the Caesar and by this long-range American rocket system. Key bridges are being targeted too now, like this one further south in Kherson, near Crimea, potentially trapping Russian armour and hinting at a future Ukrainian counter-offensive. Which all helps to explain this. All quiet, unusually quiet on this stretch of the Eastern Front. Another sign, perhaps, of Russia's faltering momentum. Just listen to that silence. The point these soldiers keep making to us along the length of this front line is that Western weapons really are making a big difference, but not yet a decisive difference. They still need many more if they are to turn the tide against the Russians. It's balanced now, 50-50, says Colonel Yuri Bereza. That's thanks to the artillery the West has sent here. But we're not yet in a position to counterattack. We still need a lot more weapons, or it will be a bloodbath. And it's not just about equipment. Manpower matters, and Ukraine has lost so many soldiers that it's still struggling to fill the gaps with fresh recruits.
Acquiring my site.
Hence this extra training by a group of private Western military experts for volunteers who've never fought before.
I would say worrying would be the fact that some of these guys could be in a trench tomorrow, or they could be on the front tomorrow, and they lack the basic soldiering skills that the West is used to. But the good positive is this is their homeland, and all 36, 37 of these soldiers seem eager to defend it. You gotta have heart. Skill's good, but heart's great.
Plenty of heart then, but still not enough weapons or trained soldiers to be sure of success.
After days of protests that have left at least 20 dead in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the United Nations has said there is no evidence that its forces fired on civilians. The perceived failure of the UN peacekeeping force to protect people from armed rebel groups led to violent demonstrations in eastern Congo. The BBC's Emmanuel Ngusa reports.
The aftermath of deadly protests that have rocked the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo over the past week. These protesters have targeted UN bases and compounds in Goma and Butembo. They accuse the UN peacekeeping force in the DR Congo, MONUSCO, of failing to protect them from armed groups operating there. This man says MONUSCO's first mission was to bring us peace, but they failed. They should go home. On Thursday, mass demonstrations spread to the town of Uviru as civilians defied a ban on mass sit-ins. They vowed to continue camping outside UN offices in the country until they get their wish of MONUSCO leaving the DR Congo completely.
We women have risen up to say that MONUSCO must leave because we are tired of seeing our children or husband, of seeing ourselves being abused every day in the presence of MONUSCO, which is there to bring peace and stability to our country.
The UN has defended itself against accusations that it fired into rampaging crowds, killing several civilians. It says it will help Congolese authorities with analyzing the bullets alleged to have killed the protesters.
We do not have any evidence that MONUSCO troops were firing at civilians. But again, we want to make sure that we do an investigation with the government to determine exactly where the shooting came from.
Overnight, the UN Security Council condemned the violence and asked the Congolese government to fully investigate and prosecute those involved. A high-profile UN delegation is also expected in Congo on Friday for urgent talks on MONUSCO. The talks will no doubt focus on the future and mandate of the peacekeeping force that's been in the country for 2 decades now. A phased withdrawal of the troops is currently ongoing in a mission that has already cost more than $1 billion. But protesters here say they want them out immediately, a standoff that no doubt raises tensions in the country's already violent east.
Tigers are making a roaring comeback in the small Himalayan nation of Nepal. It's the first country to keep a promise to double its wild tiger population in the last decade. The BBC's Rebecca Henschke reports.
Tigers have more than doubled in number in the last 10 years here in Nepal. It's a victory in a battle to bring them back from the brink of extinction. One of the key factors of Nepal's success has been strong enforcement against poaching, and that's involved the military.
Tigers are the majestic creatures, you know. Being assigned in the protection duties, it's an honor, you know, it's a privilege to be part of something that is really big.
These forests where tigers are now being protected used to be royal hunting grounds.
This is a land whose people have always lived under the menace of marauding tigers.
When Queen Elizabeth visited Nepal in 1961, she took part in a tiger hunt.
And yes, there was the tiger. King Mahendra had fulfilled a time-honored obligation of a host in Nepal and provided the royal party with a tiger to shoot.
As a result of hunting, poaching and habitat loss, there's now less than 4,000 tigers in the wild. But here in Badia National Park, there are signs of a remarkable recovery. Hundreds of cameras hidden as part of a nationwide tiger census.
And when you're analysing the footage, how do you make sure that your count is accurate?
Just like people have unique fingerprints, all tigers have different stripes. That's how we distinguish them and count them. We have seen tiger cubs and also tigers rolling around.
Samjana lost her mother-in-law last year. She's one of 16 people killed by a tiger in the last 12 months.
During the next few years, more families will suffer like me. The number of victims will soar. I feel like I'm going crazy. I want to scream into the forest and run.
When a tiger kills a human, they're tracked down and taken into captivity. There's 7 now behind bars.
More number of tigers and more number of people, definitely there's going to be conflict. So it is going to be a challenging job for us to, you know, maintain peace between two species.
Keeping that peace will be key to the successful return of the tigers.
A skeleton of a dinosaur called the Gorgosaurus, even the name is great, has sold at auction in New York for 10 million New Zealand dollars. It's believed to be related to the T-Rex and is said to have roamed the earth 77 million years ago. From New York, here's the BBC's Praktisha Gildeal.
According to the sale organizer Sotheby's, the fossil is about 3 meters tall and about 6.7 meters long. The identity of the buyer is not yet known, but the new owner will have the opportunity to name it. The Gorgosaurus means a fierce lizard and is known to have been a deadly hunter. According to paleontologists, this species roamed parts of western US and Canada almost 80 million years ago. This particular fossil was found in 2018 at private land in the state of Montana. Unlike many other countries, it's legal to sell fossils found on private property in the US. But many scientists and paleontologists are not happy. Some say the fossil should be donated to a museum for further scientific research, rather than be used as a private collection commodity by the highest bidder.
And finally tonight, to the elephant in the room, because that's what an American antique dealer is literally dealing with. He specialises in selling rare and unusual items and has one giant one that fits the bill. It's a life-sized taxidermy elephant named Doc. Megan Willagos explains.
When something odd, such as this, comes up, I guess I'm a sucker for it.
CJ Pitcher buys and sells antiques in Livermore.
Like signs, as you see around a lot of my place.
While camping, he got a call for a unique item, a life-size taxidermy elephant.
I went and met him and realized the size that I was dealing with and knew that it was going to take a lot more than me to do it.
My first thought was, how are we going to get this out?
CJ's son, Jackson, was one of the many people who put the giant creature on its side onto a trailer and down Route 4.
It was about an hour and 40 minutes for me to go from Turner to here, which is like 12 miles.
The elephant's name is Doc. It's named after the hunter's doctor who told the hunter from Turner he couldn't hunt anymore because of his health. Doc was legally shot in Zimbabwe in 1992 and mounted in 1993.
He didn't just do it for fun. He did it also because he donated all the meat and so forth.
CJ's wife, Bethany, wasn't shocked, saying he always brings home weird stuff.
It's neat. I'm glad people are enjoying it, and I'll be glad when someone enjoys it somewhere else.
CJ is looking to rehome Doc.
I don't know that I'll miss it, but definitely a cool story. I mean, it's not every day that you see an elephant at some random house in Maine.
Dozens of visitors have come to see the elephant. They can touch it, but CJ says it's not to climb on.
The most thing that I found that everybody wants to do is sit on an elephant trunk. I don't understand why. It's the only thing I ask them not to do.
If you miss the opportunity to visit Doc, there may be something else in store for you.
They said it's going to be hard to top Doc, but I think I got the next idea coming.
Oh, poor Doc. Just a little bit creepy, I think. All right, hot cross buns, your final reckons on this. Valerie says, happy to eat spicy fruit buns anytime, but the cross belongs to Easter. And Brian's got in touch to say, hot cross buns in runny, dark, strong honey. Yum. Yeah, I think you're onto something there, Brian. Hot cross buns, for those who insist on tomatoes and peaches in winter, where is their joy at food in its special season? Yeah, I get that too. Cherries, love them, and it's a sign, of Christmas. Katrina from Northland says, she stockpiles them. I love this. Yes, we want hot cross buns all year, she says. I stockpile and freeze them before Easter so we can eat them over the following few weeks. Maybe only put the cross on in the couple of weeks leading up to Easter, she says. Our family loves them. No to hot cross buns at any time, this person says. Raisins in bread are yuck. What about lemon peel and those other bits of fruit peel in anything? Ugh. And Marriott says, I grew up in the Netherlands and raisin buns and bread were available all year around. We don't have the tradition of hot cross buns. And Colin from Matamata says, just rename them hot currant buns. Don't get cross and lose your bun, he reckons. Let's ditch Easter and eat spice buns all year round, another listener says. And Jenny has got in touch to say that the best buns ever are the Dutch buns from 10 o'clock cookie. Don't know that place. Where's that? Let us know the rest of the details. And this person on Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, doctor no longer in the house, checking out ka kite, Ashley. Lots of kitsch stuff made with his face on it during his time at the helm as the Director General of Health over the past 2.5 odd years. This person says there have been so many artists who have done portraits of Dr. Ashley. Yeah, some of them good, some of them bad. I spotted one in a local cafe recently. Hey, thanks for all your feedback this evening. Have a wonderful weekend eating your currant buns or hot cross buns or not cross buns or whatever you choose to have. Thank you for your company. Enjoy your couple of days off if you're lucky enough to have them. We'll see you next week.
NZ News headlines. I'm Catriona McLeod. The head of international efforts to cut climate emissions is calling on the New Zealand government to do better and honour its pledge to halve emissions. A volcanologist believes recent heavy rain may have contributed to the collapse of a sinkhole at a Rotorua tourist attraction yesterday. Taiwan has thanked President Joe Biden for telling his Chinese counterpart that Washington remains opposed to any action that changes the status of the self-governing island. More in the news at 7.
Māpuna, te hōtaka e whakatere hia ana e au e Julia Wilcox, ia te rā horoi, hei te pūtūtanga, i runga i te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. Māpuna celebrates Aotearoa legends, leaders, artists, and you. That's Māpuna every Saturday at noon on RNZ National. He Māpuna e aroha tia ana, e kai ngākau tia ana.
Kia ora, Julian. And I'm Brian Crump, getting ready for another night on RNZ National. And of course, it's Friday, Sonic Tonic Day. And because a lot of you have been doing it tough, we thought we'd take it easy tonight. And that's the theme for the Sonic Tonic. And the 7:07 p.m. question, you're hearing it early, is what comes easy to you? Text 2101. That's pretty easy. Or email nights@rnz.co.nz or leave a comment on the Facebook page, Nights on RNZ National, and join the fun from after the news at 7. In this half hour, we begin with the detail. And tonight's detail looks at COVID and the digital age. And how do people get out to play?
Is that a swan made out of
I did it myself.
I love you.
I love you too.
my
Okay,
God.
well, shall we gossip?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a sold-out crowd in Auckland's Basement Theatre, laughing along to Snort, a weekly improvised theatre show. When was the last time you went to the theatre? For many of us, it's probably been a while. Some of us may have never been before. Theatre's never been a big moneymaker, but now more than ever, creatives and artists are worried about making enough to get by.
The past 2 years have been hard on amateur theatre groups, which have faced financial hardship amid the heartbreak of cancelled shows.
Artists and workers have spent the last 2 years of the pandemic struggling to find consistent work.
And while government funding and support packages have helped,
with the government announcing $121 million.
$37.5 million available to protect jobs in the arts and culture sectors.
theatre is still struggling to get bums on seats and money in the bank.
It has been very tough financially. We've had many times when we've looked at how are we going to survive.
Kia ora, I'm Sarah Robson, and today on The Detail, in the age of COVID-19 and streaming services, New Zealand theatre is struggling to stay relevant. Can this art form herald in a new act, or will this prove to be the final curtain call?
I was just in the right place at the right time where I had the hunger for it. People had the hunger to do things, even though no one was essentially getting paid.
Nathan Joe is a playwright, a Chinese Kiwi and creator of Scenes from a Yellow Peril, a new play exploring Asian identity, racism and privilege in Aotearoa. He's talking about how he ended up working in the theatre world.
I mean, I had a very encouraging and enthusiastic drama teacher in high school, but I didn't even do drama all the way through. And Christchurch wasn't exactly known for its strong, independent and diverse theatre scene. There was the Court Theatre, which I did enjoy going to every now and then, but I would never say I watched a show there and was like, I could do that. That could be me, or my play could be on that stage. It never really crossed my mind, frankly. Yeah, until I wrote my first play in, I think it was 2013, and submitted it to Playmarket, and they were like, hey, do you want to workshop this? And nothing really came of that specific workshop, but the opportunity to hear my words spoken out loud by actors was quite a thrill. And I thought, let's keep giving this a go.
Tonight, our smiles leave mess in their wake.
Like bull in China shop. Like China man in China shop.
Like China bull in metaphor.
Scenes from a Yellow Peril has just finished a wildly successful season at the ASB Waterfront Theatre in Auckland. The production was a collaboration with the Auckland Theatre Company, or ATC, one of New Zealand's leading professional theatre companies. But how does something like this actually end up on the stage?
Oh man, it's so difficult. It's so incredibly difficult to stage a play at scale. And the path to staging Scenes from a Yellow Peril at the ASB Waterfront was so non-linear. In many regards, it's acts of perseverance and timing and luck and the right person being there at the right time and the right people being involved. So that all up was about a 4-year process to put on that play at the Waterfront. And it was never intended for the Waterfront as well. And it's such a can of worms. But putting on something like that is near impossible to predict how that might happen in New Zealand for a New Zealand playwright, if I'm completely honest. Unless the company asks you to write that with the intention of staging that, you can't really guarantee that will happen. So Scenes happened through the fact that I wrote it out of my own volition. It was not commissioned by anyone. And then I sort of went through the process of workshopping it, developing it. And over those 4 years, different people saw it. It got readings and workshops that were open to the public. And eventually, I'm very lucky that Jonathan Bielski, the current director of ATC, saw it and thought that was of value. And then we had conversations to essentially co-produce it, because ATC didn't just license it and put on their own version of it. He enlisted the collaborators that I work with to co-produce it with the company. It's not the sort of play that they really have the cultural competency to put on by themselves, to put it bluntly. And I think they were very cognizant of that.
By having the Auckland Theatre Company involved, what security or resourcing did that mean you have access to?
I think, first of all, just the budget you get to play with is much larger than you as an individual practitioner can get access to, because typically you're working to get an application to CNZ and get that approved, which typically, if it's a single arts grant, is capped at a certain amount anyway, like 75K. So no matter what you do, you're never going to have a budget of really much more than 75K. So unless you're working for a company like ATC, or there are smaller ones that also can access more funds. But the beauty of Scenes was we had the CNZ funding that we got, and ATC also brought some more to the table. So we were working at I've done shows for 7.5K before. That's sort of the kind of world that I'm typically playing with. And the amount of people you can get involved, the quality, the caliber of the talent, the scale in which you can do things in a space like the ASB waterfront. I think a playwright typically isn't given much permission to think big and dream big, and directors aren't either. So really, we got to do the play more than what we imagined, which is such an immense privilege.
But before you got to that point of ATC being involved, was it a fairly hard road to actually get that Creative New Zealand funding across the line?
It's funny because we found it very difficult. Ankita and I, who's my main producer, we got declined twice before getting it the third time. And, most people would have stopped applying after a certain point because it's quite dispiriting. When we asked for feedback, there was nothing wrong with our applications. It's just they decided to give the money to someone else. And it's a funny one because it almost sometimes feels like a lotto, even though it's not a lotto. But what happens is there are many good applications that just can't make it through because there isn't enough funding. The rounds are so limited, ultimately. And the reality is, to do a show like Scenes from Yellow Peril properly, you need funding. Like, I think to do the arts properly in New Zealand, and anywhere, and pay people properly, you need funding. So Creative New Zealand, like it or not, when it comes to independent artists, they're essentially the gatekeepers. That's not something they're pleased about either, but it is a situation we're in because we have such limited ways for shows to happen. You could be a very lucky playwright who ATC just picks up your play and you don't have to co-produce it or produce it yourself, but I've very rarely been in that situation.
Bats used to be a bit of a flea pit. Before it became the Bats that we know and love, it was pretty grungy.
Jonty Hendry is the General Manager of Bats Theatre in Wellington.
But if you were to walk in now, because we're tenants and we have landlords from Wingnut Film, which are Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh, one of their businesses, they bought the building when it looked like Bats could go out of operation.
Bats isn't the only theatre that's been at risk of closure in recent years. In 2018, Dunedin's Fortune Theatre was forced to shut its doors after finding itself in financial difficulties.
Outrage, concern and tears have followed the sudden news this week of the Fortune Theatre being put into receivership.
Leaving the Lower South Island without a professional theatre. The board chair says the problem was simple, not enough people were going to the shows.
Jonty was the creative director of the Fortune Theatre when it closed, so he knows how tough things can get. But at Bats, they've been lucky. The building they're in has been refurbished and they've got new performance spaces.
A lot of people that used to work there go, oh my goodness, this is just so different than our experience. But at the heart, Bats has a grungy edge. And at the heart, although it's a flash premises, the real soul of Bats is about stepping up and challenging the norm and trying new ideas, trying things out. So I think what is really great about Bats and what we hear from our audiences and what we really know that we need to hang on to is the idea that because our ticket prices are low, and that was a really important part of the setup of Bats, to make the work as accessible in terms of financial barriers as possible, that you don't mind taking a punt on the show. And it's almost like you go and see a show and go, nah, I didn't really like that one, but I'll come back next week and see what that one's about.
By creating the community that you have around Bats, do the people coming through the doors, are they going there for the experience of Bats and it doesn't really matter what's on? They're just going because this is a fun place, might be a bit hit and miss of what we see, but we're going to have a great time regardless.
You see, we get that feedback from our audiences, is that it is about emerging creatives coming in and trying their first gig. So some of the audience members may be mates. I mean, we have a lot of people that come and support their mates that are on stage, whether they work in the arts or not. But we also have a wide range of people. I mean, remember, we have small theatre spaces, so it's quite interesting to see that our spaces book out. People tend to rock up in the last 48 hours. They book or they rock up on the day, but we get a lot of full houses. And it's interesting when you sit there and go, my gosh, the demographic is quite wide, whether they be family members, whānau, or whether they're artists themselves. But a lot of them actually just want to see something that is, as you say, refreshing and new, and has that energy of it being maybe a little bit punk with a small p, you know, has a sense of it's not going to be dusty or museum theatre.
In terms of increasing the diversity of what we see on the stage in New Zealand and that reflecting what New Zealand is now, how difficult is it to get productions across the line?
I think it's increasingly more common. I think historically it's been absolutely quite terrible. And there have been think pieces and Twitter threads and analysis done by critics and theatre writers over the last 5 to 10 years that have really nailed down different large companies that are, funded, investment companies that are funded through CNZ that haven't reflected the landscape in which we live. Auckland Theatre Company historically has had a whole year of shows that do not reflect Auckland. That's ironic and it's hypocritical at worst and ignorant at best. And again, it's not, I guess that is a criticism historically.
Here's Jonty Hendry from BATS again.
Peter Harcourt, in his description around New Zealand theatre, talks about how that we moved away from being the Britain of the South Seas in a way. So I saw theatre in the mid-70s. In those days, the professional theatre, in a way, was modelled a little bit on the British repertory system, and that had some New Zealand work, but little New Zealand work, and was trying to show the best of what's overseas. And I think if you were to jump now 4 decades and think about it, I think the real energy now, that there isn't the case of can we do it? Maybe the question is how do we best do it to reflect ourselves? Now, by saying that, I think there's a juggling act. You can do Shakespeare and you can do Chekhov, and they are just somehow they manage to survive for decades. But the sort of work that I might have encountered in the 70s are by playwrights that your listeners probably, most of them, won't know. They're playwrights that had their moment in the sun because they're writing about something that was important from their perspective. And what's great is that the question now is, okay, if we're going to invest, surely we should be investing in the work that's reflecting us. And that's, I think, where the real difference lies.
Back to playwright Nathan Joe.
I think the landscape is changing. And you can see companies like Auckland Theatre Company now with Dawn Raids.
So the play is set in the mid-70s in central Auckland.
With Haka Party incident.
Who do you think is responsible for the racism in New Zealand?
My play.
Look at how bad I am at math, lol, model minority, lol, K-pop, lol, anime, lol, and I lolled, and I lolled, and I lolled.
Really making an effort towards reflecting the city that the company represents, which it should. It feels so obvious, but I think programmers are often scared that their main subscriber base will not enjoy these plays. But the future of theatre lies in a diversity of audiences and a diversity of thought and people seeing themselves reflected, because you need to build new audiences ultimately, as well as respecting the ones you have ultimately as well. And I get that that's a tricky balance, but it's so nearsighted if you program only to cater towards your current subscriber base. I mean, theatre is a really difficult medium to cut through with because you're competing with so much. But the way to cut through is to actually have your pulse on the zeitgeist. And having your pulse on the zeitgeist is easier said than done, but you can tell when a company is trying and not trying.
There have been conversations about declining numbers of people going to the theatre, accessibility of plays and, and the performing arts more generally. You've touched on this, but is the way to ensure the survival of theatre as an art form, to ensure it's reaching new audiences, theatre companies do need to break out of their box where perhaps they have catered to a fairly narrow audience base, and the way to keep it alive is to actually be branching out, experimenting.
100%. Programmers need to be brave and courageous and to move with the times. I think what's historically happened is we've had programmers who are stuck in their ways and think they know the answers or think they can just sort of write it out. Whereas the last few years have proved that you actually, if anything, need to be more cognizant than ever. I think COVID has really thrown all the issues that the industry is facing into stark light. And if you're not building new audiences, theatre has no future. I mean, it's a simple fact. And I think we all know this in our bones, but to actually act on it with integrity is really difficult. I guess I've been very lucky in that working as the assistant programmer at Basement Theatre, I go, there are constantly new audiences who are hungry for things that we have not tapped into and that we're still tapping into. And people really do love live performance. There is something you cannot get through a screen. And there's something beautiful about, the person next to you gasping or the collective sort of inhale of breath as something happens in a show is just such a beautiful thing.
Who was in the theatre for scenes? Tell me about the audience and the reaction.
What was amazing was seeing such a wide range of people. I like to talk about how the two poles of audience members that I saw the most, or really clocked the most, were like young Asian females and older Pakeha women. Like those were the two most visible in the audience that I would always kind of clock. And also everything in between, but it was like such a range of young people who, after I talked to them, were like, oh, that's the first time I've seen an ATC show. Or that's the first, this was much less, but the first piece of theatre I ever saw. And I'm like, that's friggin' incredible to me. And like, what an honour to also have that exchange between an audience member and myself.
And in some ways, that proves the power of theatre. It is still relevant, despite the fact we're living in a time when we can, head on to Netflix, search something up, watch something time and time again.
Absolutely. And I think in some ways, the time we live in makes theatre more relevant than ever. As kind of oxymoronic as that might sound, I think it just means that the theatre that we see, the theatre that we make, has to offer something that screen cannot. And I think theatre can offer so much that screen cannot. It's just that when we try to replicate screen on stage, what we're just seeing is like a poor man's version. But really what we want is some sort of ritual. We want some sort of coming together, some sort of event that makes us feel alive and present and focused. All the things that screen can sort of disengage us with ourselves sometimes, I want to feel the bodies in space. I want to see and smell and hear, and I want to engage. I want to be able to turn off my phone and engage with something that spans centuries of human tradition. I think that's a really powerful, visceral thing that you can't actually name. People are still going to gigs. People are still going to the theatre. It might not be at its all-time peak, but there is a hunger.
You mentioned there about the experience of going to the theatre and experiencing something with a group of people. This is at the complete other end of the scale. But I saw Matilda on the West End in London. And I just happened to be sitting next to a probably 4-year-old girl who was there at a matinee with her dad, and she was on the edge of her seat for the entire performance. But that made, for me, it was a reminder of watching it from a child's eyes and almost seeing the magic of it from her perspective and watching her reactions, because that's what theatre is about, right?
Absolutely. I find some of my best favourite theatre experiences or gig experiences are watching things through other people's eyes, and that collective consciousness that you kind of start to plug into. You're not experiencing it as a lone person on an island. You're kind of gauging, it's like when someone laughs and that causes someone else to laugh and someone else laughs. And that's why stand-up's so great, because you get caught in these sort of laughing loops that you would not get caught in if you were watching it by yourself.
How much of a reckoning has COVID been in terms of theatre in New Zealand? What impact has it had, particularly when you're talking about resources, development of artists, and actually getting bums on seats? Because that's the thing, isn't it?
Look, there is a little bit of we're noticing a reticence to come out at the moment, which is absolutely understandable given the uncertainty. But I think mask wearing it makes a huge difference. And we have been really struck coming out of the 2020 lockdown with just how audiences flock back, and audiences are still going to the shows that are happening at BATS. There's just a slight drop. So to answer your question, the effect is ongoing, and Omicron it has proven to be a different beast, shall we say, than the last 2 years, in the sense that Omicron's impact means that a show might just almost get presented and then have to be delayed because someone is a close contact and has to isolate or has the virus.
Now, there was drama all you could want when the Wellington Opera opened La Traviata at the St James Theatre this weekend. At the last minute, 2 principal singers had to isolate due to COVID, other cast members had to cover vocally, and the director and assistant director ended up on stage. Wow.
And so what we're noticing is that there's a lot more instability. And if you look at the larger companies that are producing work, it's a lot more expensive because you have to look at your covers and your understudies and things like that. And of course, not to mention the cost of everything going up. So again, I feel optimistic in the sense that I think the sector is incredibly resourceful and has done really well. But I would be lying to you if I didn't say that the effect is ongoing. Actually, another impact is happening is that people, of course, are having to move away from the arts or are moving to more sustainable and regular income. And that is probably that's a really important threat, particularly, you may have noticed in the papers recently, particularly for our artisans and our workers behind the scenes, our techies and the people that may not be on stage. But I know it's the case for artists as well that are in front of audiences. Okay, it's tough, but I know that I've noticed as well, we've noticed at BATS that the passion and the commitment to making work has not waned. It's come back in full force. We had 2 residencies to offer for the remainder of the year at BATS, and we had over 35 applications. Now, a year ago, it was quite different as Delta was hitting and was about to hit. Things were a lot less confident. But the confidence is back. It's about us managing the circumstances, effectively lessening the spread of the virus through mask wearing and other measures, and just recognising that it's here for a while and we have to just work as best we can with it.
Where do you see the future of theatre in Aotearoa? Fingers crossed, hopefully you're not the only one who is getting support to put on these productions that are bringing theatre to new audiences.
Yeah, God, I hope not. I mean, I'd be lucky if I got another opportunity like this, to be frank, let alone other people. So I hope ATC feel good about the reception of scenes and that encourages them to work with new collaborators and new voices and take risks. I hope other companies follow ATC's suit in doing so. I mean, the problem is I don't know where the onus really lies. I mean, kind of goes all the way to policy and the government. I don't think it's really ultimately up to companies to do all the heavy lifting. In the same way, I don't think it's up to individuals to just persevere and toughen up and be stoic and just keep on keeping on. I think that's so difficult after a certain point. And all it takes is a bad day to quit, I think, sometimes. So, I don't know. I hope audiences just keep seeing things, but also I know that's hard in the climate. I genuinely think it's such a collaborative effort to continue making arts in New Zealand, performing arts in New Zealand thrive and prosper, whether that's the makers, the audience, or the facilitators for that. But I'm hopeful. I think if I think too much about it, I get a bit despondent, but I'm ultimately hopeful.
That's it for today. I'm Sarah Robson. The Detail is public interest journalism funded through New Zealand On Air and produced by Newsroom for RNZ. You can get us downloaded free to your mobile device every weekday from any podcast platform. Today's episode was engineered by William Saunders and produced by Bonnie Harrison and Mark Jennings. And thanks to Nathan Joe and Jonty Hendry. Mā te wā.
Kia ora, Sarah. And the next brand new edition of The Detail will become available online from wherever you might get your podcasts from, which includes rnz.co.nz podcasts and features page, at about 5 on Monday morning. They are uploaded each weekday morning around about 5 a.m. You'll be able to hear a repeat broadcast of that edition of The Detail. However, if you're up at about 2:15 tomorrow morning. 4 minutes to 7, I'm Brian Crump, getting ready for another night on RNZ National. And our Sonic Tonic, well, there's a couple of reasons that we've chosen this particular topic. One is that my usual producer, Andrew Robertson, is away. And my fill-in producer, Tim, we just wanted to make it easy for him. So we've gone for that topic, easy, because there's lots of songs about it being easy. And the 7:07pm question, and the other reason was, a lot of you are doing it tough at the moment, or even if you're not really doing it tough, you just feel a bit rough around the edges at the moment. So we decided to dedicate tonight's Sonic Tonic to taking it easy. And the 7:07pm question is, what comes easy to you? And I noticed that Andrew, bless him, whether it's a coincidence or not, has just sent through a picture taken from the viewpoint of his, what could I say, chest. He's maybe lying down and he's taking a photograph that looks out to the pool where he is. He's in New Caledonia, I think, looking out to the pool in a beautiful tropical blue sky and no wind, and you can see his nicely tanned legs. He's taking it easy. He's reclining. Andrew, you probably can't hear me saying this, but lovely to get your email. I'm going to put that up on the Facebook page. I also, on the subject of taking it easy, got this from Shirlene. And I rather like this, even if Shirlene's a bit peeved with me. Kia ora, Brian. Did I just hear you say, what comes easy to you? It should be easily, as you're qualifying the verb to come. Therefore, an adverb is required, not an adjective. The same applies to drive slowly rather than drive slow, which is just lazy grammar. So, obviously, Shirlene, you've just heard the answer from me. What comes easy to me? Of course, it would be bad grammar. And, of course, I'm an announcer on RNZ National. That's bad news. Can we console ourselves with a bit of fun after the news at 7? If you want to talk about what comes easily to you, text me on 2101, email nights@rnz.co.nz, or leave a comment on the Facebook page, Nights on RNZ National, and join the fun after 7. Now, after 8, at around about 8:30, our Friday Night Live this week features the Nigerian, UK-born, now Auckland-based artist Masbo Q. And here's a preview.
And be free. And be free. Go and be free. Go and be free. Go and be free. If my heart cannot keep you for one more day, then you must go and be free. 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 If my heart can't convince you to stay here with me, it's all good. Go and be free. Go and be free. Yeah, we gon' be all right.
Masbo Q. Here's the Friday Night Live act at about 8:30. Sounds like comes easy to him, doesn't it?
RNZ News at 7. Ngā nui, good evening. I'm Catriona McLeod. A volcanologist believes recent heavy rain may have contributed to the collapse of a sinkhole at a Rotorua tourist attraction yesterday. A woman visiting from Australia fell into a sinkhole near the entrance of the Whakarewarewa village, suffering serious burns. The geothermal attraction has closed while WorkSafe and Rotorua Lakes Council investigate. GNS Volcanologist Brad says heavy rain in the area during the preceding days would have sped up deterioration of the surface.